Another week means a new This Week in Star Wars Unlimited. And this week, we're going to be talking about the Spotlight decks FFG reviewed in the previous live stream, as well as Set 4 spoilers with a new 35-point base, as well as we're going to be talking about briefly Week 4 of Set 3 and planetary qualifiers. So let's go ahead and get into it. And let's start off with the Spotlight decks. This is what FFG covered in last week's live stream to go into depth of what you're actually going to get and why they've kind of pivoted to these new deck formats as opposed to the 2-player starter kits. So first off, these will still be pre-built decks, meaning they're going to come with leaders, bases, tokens, etc. And on top of that, a little extra bonus, they mentioned that it will contain one additional booster pack or a booster pack for jump to light speed. Now, the difference on these new Spotlight decks over the starter decks is these are not intended for what they refer to as onboarding. Obviously, the 2-player starter decks for sets 1, 2, and 3 were kind of targeted in their own words to onboarding new players, getting new players into Star Wars Unlimited. Obviously, Jump to Light Speed is set 4 and represents year 2 or the start of year 2 for SWU. So I think they're pivoting a little bit to be like, okay, we've probably got people onboarded. Now let's give them some options for these kind of quote unquote starter decks that are going to be a little bit more competitive than the 2-player kits. And the competitive is their words, not mine. They said that in the stream. And we're going to start off this set with one focusing on Han Solo and the other focusing on Boba Fett. But what is an interesting comment is they hinted that there might be more to come. Now, granted, they didn't say whether that's going to be more of these Spotlight decks for set 4 for Jump to Lightspeed, or obviously just more Spotlight decks for, future sets 5, 6, so on and so forth. But what they're going to try to do with these Spotlight decks is it lets them to be a little bit more competitive. Like I said, they're going to drive more synergies with the unit. So that way the deck is more kind of cohesive that way. They did also mention that these sets will have reprints, but the reprints will have the previous set codes and numbering. So if it was a reprint from, let's say, Shadows of the Galaxy, and it was card number 300, it will represent that on the actual card, as opposed to if you look at the starter sets and if anything that was in there previously, those represented or the card numbers were for the existing set. So even though you may have got a resupply in Shadows of the Galaxy, it said SHD as opposed to Spark of Rebellion from set 1. Additionally on that, something that they hinted at again, but said they're going to get into more details next week, is the new cards will actually have a rotation symbol, which obviously that means they're thinking long-term, both for competitive, like how they're going to start maybe cycling these cards out as obviously they get to sets, let's say 10, 15, 20, so on and so forth. But these are going to be self-contained playable decks. So you are going to buy the Han pack or the Boba Fett pack, and you're going to be able to have a deck, and you're going to play against your buddies or at a local store, just be a little bit more competitive than the 2-player starter decks. Now, like I said, they're going to come in 2 sets. Let's talk about the Han deck first. Obviously, Han is focused on odds, never tell me the odds, so on and so forth. So they're going to continue that theme with this deck where all the cards are focused on odd cost cards, or even Han's ability is going to be focused on that. Even going as far as saying all cards are going to have an odd cost in the set. Now, they did mention some of the piloting cards, might have an even cost, but I'm assuming the core cost for every card will be, a 1, a 3, a 5, so on and so forth. They did mention that there won't be any 7 drops though. So basically 1, 3s, and 5s. And true to the Jump to Light Speed kind of theme, they're all going to be focused around piloting in the Han deck. For the Boba Fett deck, if you look at the Boba Fett leader, he's kind of focused around indirect damage, or let's call it, doing damage to a unit that already has damage on it, or non-combat damage. So his deck is going to be focused on, what I would call ping damage, or just cards that are going to inflict damage directly. So Daring Raids, Open Fire, or even the new cards in set 4 that are going to do indirect damage, etc. So that way you're going to get the value out of the Boba leader where you're exhausting him and you're doing indirect damage to already damaged units. So with that kind of wraps up the Spotlight decks. Next up, let's get into spoiler season for set 4. They did release a bunch of new cards this week. Obviously, we got new leaders, I think the biggest probably news that folks have probably already seen is there was a new base, a 35-point base announced. And of course, there's new units, events, and upgrades. So let's kind of dive into those quickly. We did get 3 new leaders this week. We got a Grand Admiral Thrawn, basically his second leader unit. This is a vigilance villainy over the cunning villainy that we had before. His ability, both on the deployed and non-deployed side, is all focused around the when defeated keywords, which you're going to see more of coming up. So it's something to call out there. Rose Tico, basically all about healing. She's going to, but specifically healing vehicles. So she gives healing on her deployed and non-deployed side to vehicles. And then we've got Rio Durant, who was a great character in the Han Solo movie, which I really enjoyed, meaning the movie and him as well. This is actually probably one of the better pilot leaders we've seen so far, just with his stat line being a 5-cost 3/5, and whether you deploy him as a unit or as a pilot. Granted, there's probably more to come, but just with the short amount of pilot leaders we got coming out at 5 and what you get, he's probably been the best with his granting of +1 power as well as Saboteur. So that's pretty cool. Now, getting into probably the big topic is this new 35-point base called the Colossus. Trade-off, obviously, to getting to more points or hit points is your opening hand. You're now going to draw 1 less card. So instead of drawing 6 cards, you're going to be drawing 5 cards, which, depending on the type of deck you're playing, that's probably not going to be a big deal. Obviously, if you're playing more of an aggro, though I can't think of a strong aggro that's playing blue base, I could be wrong. So you're probably okay sacrificing that 1 card. But I think of control decks or even some mid-range decks, like you think Anakin Blue, where, he does the damage to boost himself or other units, that not drawing that additional card for 5 points more of health to do those boosts might be worth it. Again, obviously the proof's going to be in the pudding when we start playing with this. Hard control, obviously paying off here. I was actually thinking kind of Palp, right? As we all know, Palp is a very slow leader to come out, comes out on 8 resources. Again, giving up 1 card for that 5 more points of health to kind of just stretch the game, especially if you can get Dr. Perishing out or just things that are with the, draw card type events. That might be well worth it. So it'll be very interesting to see how this affects the meta in set 4 or going forward. I was surprised that they went, right from 30 to 35. I thought maybe we might see a smaller jump, maybe to like a 32-point base, but it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. And it's also kind of key, where I talked about this last week in the Game Genic stream, where they talked about their new damage pad and how it was going to be future-proof because it goes up to 49. Obviously, they're making use of that right out of the gate with this new 35-point base. I welcome thoughts and comments on that down below as well. What do you all think about this new 35-point base and what it might do to the meta? Getting into cards, units, upgrades, whatever. Let's start with aggro. You notice here you're going to see a lot of when defeated triggers. So you got that on the First Order Stormtrooper. You've got that on the Droid Missile platform, which looks to be a really good card. The First Order Stormtrooper, not sure I'm playing that over just a regular Stormtrooper, but I digress. But you think about those when defeated triggers with like Admiral Thrawn, the leader, where now maybe you're playing red or blue-black with red. You're going to be triggering those events. We've got an IG-88 pilot unit, which looks pretty good with a +3 power when he's attacking a damaged unit. We've also got Captain Tarkin with the artwork from the Rebels, which I like, giving +1 power and overwhelm to a friendly vehicle unit. So again, looking at vehicles because the piloting is so much about what this set is going to be. For the Vigilance cards, we've got a lot of Vigilance cards this week. But the key theme to take away from all of these is notice that there's a lot of, like I said, when defeated triggers across the card. So the Chimera's got it, the Onyx Squadron Brute's got it, Director Krennic has got it, and the Landing Shuttle. Director Krennic's more about actually making those cards cost less, not necessarily him himself having a when defeated. But anyways, you're going to see a lot of synergies here with Grand Admiral Thrawn. And of course, I think Krennic, just in general, is a 2/2 coming in and shielded. You think of, you've seen some of these new Gar Saxon builds and the PQs with set 3. So now he's going to get a buff because he's got a shield. So might be some good stuff there with Krennic just on that 2 for 2/2 drop. On the command side, a pretty low week for command, so I kind of made these a little bigger. We only got 2 cards. We got the Kijimi Patrollers. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Basically, you're going to play it, and you're going to get some TIE Fighter tokens. The Leia Organa card, I like the artwork. I think it's pretty cool. Her and the kind of giving the orders to the Echo Base folks and Echo Base defenders. But it's also a decent card. She's got Restore 1, and then when played, if you attack with a pilot, it gets +1 power and Restore 1 for that attack. So that's pretty cool. The big amount of cards this week is Cunning. We got 2 slides for Cunning. First, I'd like to call out, we got Boshek, obviously coming in from episode 4. New Hope, kind of buddies with Han and Chewie. My only comment to this card is, to me, it looks like Nicolas Cage. If anybody else thinks it does, again, give me a thumbs up or give me a like in the comments below. But just a decent pilot. But my main takeaway is, man, does he look like Nicolas Cage? I think the real success stories or the real shine from these cards this week is this Commandeer card, which is basically going to be a cheaper change of heart, though it's going to be focused on vehicles. But it's got some slight differences to it. One, like I said, obviously you have to capture a vehicle with it, but you can capture a non-readied vehicle and it will ready it, which is key, because obviously when you play Change of Heart, you want to capture a unit that's already ready so you can swing with it. And the other thing is, it basically bounces it back to the owner's hand. So if you capture it either before it's attacked or after it's attacked, you're going to get an attack with it. Then when you return it, it's going to bounce to the owner's hand again. So they're going to have to pay that cost, 6 or less. So 6, 5, or whatever you're going to be grabbing from. So again, even though it's a vehicle specific, non-leader vehicle specific, I think that's some pretty cool, pretty strong powers. I think, again, probably one of the better cards we saw this week. Same with the Houndstooth, which is getting an attacking and exhaust unit that didn't interplay this phase. It'll deal combat damage before the defender. So kind of similar to First Strike, or even kind of Boba Fett unit, where if the unit's exhaust and come in this round, you can kind of avoid some damage. So that's pretty cool. And that comes in at a 4/3 for 3. So that's a pretty decent stat line with a decent, some decent keywords there. Going with more Cunnings, we've got 2 Mandalorian pilots. We got Boba Fett, and we've got a double yellow Mandalorian. None of these really look all that exciting. Again, we'll see what they look like, but their stat lines aren't all that great. On the double yellow Mandalorian, the exhaust up to 2 ground units is pretty interesting. So it'll see how folks slot that into, let's say mono yellow Han decks or whatever. Would that really take the place of Cantina Bouncer or whatnot? So obviously time will tell on that, but probably a decent card. The other one's, pretty average at best. And then finally, we only got 2 single aspect cards. We got a single aspect hero and single aspect villainy card. Again, another great card I think that we got this week is this R2-D2 piloting card, which if you play him as a pilot, he costs nothing. So if you play 1, he's the normal 1/4 kind of R2 that you've seen with the regular Spark of Rebellion. R2 minus his, on attack or when played action of looking at cards. But his really is where he's going to shine is this piloting, because when he's piloting, he's free. So he costs nothing. And then he actually allows for a second pilot to be attached to that unit, which is going to be great. And he gives you a +1/+1 bump on the stat line. I think this will probably be really good in some of the early Sabine decks. You think about dropping A-Wing, Green Squadron A-Wings down and then getting this on there for free. So now it's what, a 2/4 on defense, but it's a 4 on attack. And then, of course, if you want to get another pilot on there, we'll see how that plays out. If not, but a free bump on, on some of those Sabine ships might be pretty good. And then the shuttle ST-149, again, just continuing on with the when defeated or when played mechanics. When it's played or when it's defeated, you can move the shield token around. So that'd be some pretty interesting play style there. But again, tying probably more into Grand Admiral Thrawn and how you might use that. And to just wrap this video up, we did have week 4 of the PQs. Not a lot here to really report on. There was 23 events this week. Again, great turnouts. We had 5 with over 100. I actually played at the Seattle PQ. We had, I think, 115 participants, which was really cool. It was a good event, fun to go play in. But really right now, I think probably anybody that's in the competitive scene, the meta is the meta. If you go look across all these events, you'll see the normal suspects, lots of Han yellows, lots of Sabine greens, Django, Tarkentown, so on and so forth. So I won't dive too much into that, but what I did want to call out was what I thought was some cool outliers or just some general shout outs where we did have a mono green Yoda take down the PQ in Hawaii. And Shreveport here in the States, we had a Sabine ECL head-to-head for first and second place, which I don't think I'd seen yet. I don't think I've seen two Sabines facing off in the championship for the championship round. And then over in Italy, our friends there, somebody won a PQ with a Prez Vizsla blue, so basically playing a control deck. I can't remember if I've ever even seen Prez Vizsla in any competitive events or showdowns. Maybe I'm trying to think of maybe even some local stuff, but nothing really outside of maybe draft or doing sealed. So anyways, well, that's what we've got this week for Star Wars Unlimited. I thank you for watching. And until next time, I hope you have a great day.